February 10th, 2026, 3:17 in the morning, the Persian Gulf. The USS Stout is alone, not strategically alone. The Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group is 90 nautical miles to the south. But tactically, operationally, in this exact moment, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer is the only American warship within 40 miles of open water. She's conducting what the Navy calls presence operations, showing the flag, reminding every nation that watches from coastal radar stations and satellite feeds that American power projection in this region is not theoretical. It is physical. It is armed. It is here. And in the Persian Gulf, everyone watches. The ship's crew of 329 has been at sea for 67 consecutive days. They've conducted 23 transit escorts, intercepted 4 suspicious vessels, and tracked Iranian military activity across thousands of square miles of contested water. Tonight is supposed to be routine. Another patrol, another data collection run, another night of watching radar screens, and drinking bad coffee somewhere between boredom and exhaustion. At 3:17, routine ended. What happened to the USS Stout in the 29 minutes that followed would demonstrate two things simultaneously: the terrifying vulnerability of modern warships and the terrifying speed of American retaliation. They are not contradictory, they are the same story told from opposite ends of a missile. To understand what happened, you need to understand what the Persian Gulf had become by February 2026. This was not the Gulf of previous years. 4 months of escalating confrontations had transformed the waterway from a tense but manageable environment into something approaching an active combat zone. Every American ship operated under modified rules of engagement. Weapon systems stayed hot around the clock. Crews maintained heightened readiness during every watch rotation. Sleep was rationed. Nerves were frayed. Decision timelines had collapsed from minutes to seconds because seconds were now the margin between a warning and a catastrophe. The Iranians had adapted. Their fast attack boats no longer operated in predictable patterns. Their shore-based missile batteries had been dispersed and hardened after previous American strikes degraded fixed installations. Their intelligence networks had matured to the point where they tracked American patrol schedules, monitored American movements across the Gulf, and waited, patiently, methodically, for an opportunity. The opportunity came at 3:17. The Stout was transiting northwest, following the standard shipping lane that runs along the Saudi coastline. Her AN/SPY-1D phased array radar was simultaneously tracking 47 contacts, merchant vessels, fishing boats, oil platform beacons, and 3 Iranian patrol craft maintaining a deliberate 15 nautical mile distance. Nothing unusual, nothing that didn't fit the expected pattern of a tense but stable night. But the radar wasn't seeing everything. Declassified assessments released months after this engagement described the Iranian tactic in detail. They called it shadow launching. Mobile missile batteries were positioned behind terrain features, rocky promontories, coastal ridgelines, elevated geography that physically blocked direct radar observation from sea level. Forward spotters, small teams operating from concealed positions on shore, provided targeting data through encrypted radio links. The ship could track the spotters. It couldn't see what the spotters were directing. Hidden behind a rocky promontory 31 nautical miles to the northeast, a mobile Noor missile battery was already aimed at the Stout. At 3:17:14, that battery fired. The Noor anti-ship missile is a Chinese C-802 variant, manufactured under license in Iran. It is not the most advanced weapon in the world, but it doesn't need to be. It launched from its concealed position, climbed briefly to clear the terrain, then dropped immediately to sea-skimming altitude. Speed, Mach 0.9. Flight. Profile, 15 meters above the water. Radar cross-section, small. At that altitude, against the background clutter of wave returns, it is genuinely difficult to detect. The Stout's AN/SLQ-32 electronic warfare system detected the missile's active radar seeker at 3:17:41, 27 seconds after launch. 27 seconds of complete invisibility. In naval combat, 27 seconds is not a minor gap. It is a chasm. Every second that passes before detection is a second the missile travels unopposed toward its target. The NOR had already closed a significant fraction of the engagement envelope before anyone on the Stout knew it existed. The moment the system classified the contact as hostile, the entire ship changed. Alarms sounded simultaneously across every compartment. The Combat Information Center erupted into what the Navy trains as controlled chaos. Everyone moving, everyone with a specific role, procedures executing in parallel because sequential decision-making is too slow. The Aegis combat system calculated an engagement solution in under 2 seconds and was already requesting weapons release. Time to impact, approximately 85 seconds. Weapons release requires human authorization. The system can calculate the solution. The system can prepare the interceptor. But someone has to push the button. Someone has to take responsibility for what happens next. That someone was Lieutenant Commander Patricia Vance, the tactical action officer on duty. She had trained for this moment for 11 years. She had executed this exact scenario in simulators hundreds of times, running through the decision tree until the steps were reflexive. She had never done it when the missile was real. At 3:17:44, 3 seconds after detection, she authorized weapons free. The first SM-2 Block 3A missile left its vertical launch cell at 3:17:46. The second followed 1 second later. Standard doctrine, 2 interceptors per incoming threat for high-confidence kills. The SM-2 travels at Mach 3.5, but the geometry of this engagement was demanding. The Noor was already inside 20 nautical miles and closing fast. The intercept window was narrow, and there was almost no margin for a third attempt. At 3:18:52, the first SM-2 reached its target. Miss. The proximity fuse detonated, but the NOR was 12 meters outside the lethal fragmentation radius. Shrapnel peppered the Iranian missile's airframe, damaging it but not destroying it. The NOR kept flying, damaged and trailing debris, its radar seekers still locked on the Stout. At 3:18:54, the second SM-2 struck. This one connected. The NOR disintegrated 4.7 nautical miles from the ship. Debris rained into the Gulf. The Combat Information Center registered the kill. But the engagement wasn't over. What the Stout's crew didn't know, what they couldn't know until it was almost too late, was that the Iranians had fired 2 missiles, not 1. The second NOR had launched 8 seconds after the first, following a slightly different flight path and using the radar signature of the lead missile to mask its own presence. The technique is called trailer hiding. One missile screens another. The trailing weapon remains invisible until the lead missile is destroyed, at which point the second missile is suddenly revealed, closer, faster, and with almost no time to respond. The SLQ-32 detected the second missile at 3:18:31. The moment the first NOR's destruction cleared the radar picture, there it was. Time to impact, 23 seconds. 23 seconds is not enough time to launch another SM-2, guide it to intercept, and achieve a kill. The engagement envelope had collapsed entirely. The Phalanx CIWS, the ship's last line of defense, a 20mm rotary cannon designed specifically for this scenario, was already tracking. At 3:18:47, Phalanx opened fire. 4,500 rounds per minute, a near-continuous stream of tungsten penetrators reaching out toward the incoming missile at over a kilometer per second. At 3:18:51, rounds began striking the Noor. The missile's flight path wobbled. Its guidance logic degraded as components failed under repeated impacts. At 3:18:53, the Noor's warhead detonated, not from a direct hit, from damage accumulation. The Phalanx had shredded enough of the missile's critical systems that something structural gave way, triggering detonation before the missile reached the ship. The detonation happened 340 meters from the Stout's starboard side. 340 meters sounds like a comfortable distance. It is not. A Noor missile carries a 165-kilogram semi-armor-piercing warhead. When that warhead detonates, the blast wave travels outward at supersonic speed, and it throws fragments in every direction, some as small as ball bearings, some as large and heavy as dinner plates, all of them moving at thousands of feet per second. At 340 meters, the blast wave had attenuated significantly. But attenuated and harmless are not the same thing. The Stout rocked hard to port. Sailors were thrown against bulkheads. Equipment shifted in its mounts. Alarms multiplied across every display in the CIC. The fragments were worse than the blast. They reached the ship in under a second. Most struck water. Dozens struck the superstructure. Antenna arrays, sensor housings, the outer hull above the waterline. One fragment, later estimated at 2.3 kilograms, penetrated the hull near the waterline. It passed through an equipment compartment, missed a sleeping sailor by less than a meter, and buried itself in an interior bulkhead. 3 smaller fragments struck the bridge windows. The reinforced glass held, but the impacts sent the bridge crew diving for cover. One fragment struck Petty Officer Second Class James Morrison. He was on the weather deck conducting a routine topside inspection when the detonation occurred. The fragment hit his left thigh. He went down immediately, bleeding through his uniform onto the deck. The Stout wasn't sinking. She wasn't critically damaged, but she had been hit. An American warship had taken fire from an Iranian missile in the Persian Gulf, and a sailor was bleeding on the deck. The time was 3:18:54. Captain Robert Chen reached the bridge at 3:19:12. He had been in his cabin when the engagement began, the first time he had attempted to sleep in 40 hours. The sounds of vertical launch system firing and combat alarms had brought him running through passageways at full speed. What he found? Controlled tension. The CIC was tracking the 3 Iranian patrol craft, all of which were now accelerating away from the Stout at maximum speed. Damage control teams were assessing the hull penetration. The corpsman was treating Morrison on the weather deck. The communications officer was transmitting contact reports to 5th Fleet. And Lieutenant Commander Vance was asking the question that everyone in the CIC was already thinking. "Sir, do we have weapons release authority for the launch? Sight?" The question that Captain Chen faced in that moment would be studied at the Naval War College for years afterward. He had a wounded sailor. He had a damaged ship. He had unambiguous evidence of an Iranian attack. Missile debris, radar tracks, trajectory data, all pointing to a specific location on the Iranian coast. Standing rules of engagement authorized him to respond to hostile fire without requesting additional permission. He could shoot back right now. But the complications were real. The Stout carried Tomahawk cruise missiles. She could strike the confirmed launch site within minutes. But Tomahawk strikes on Iranian territory carried strategic implications that extended far beyond tactical response. Every previous strike on Iranian soil had been authorized at the highest levels of government. Chen was a ship captain, not a strategist. The Iranians had a history of using American military responses as justification for escalation, and escalation in a waterway that carried a third of the world's seaborne oil had consequences that no ship captain was positioned to fully calculate. He could also pursue the fleeing patrol craft. They hadn't fired the missiles. They were spotters, intelligence gatherers, not shooters. Destroying them might relieve the pressure on his crew, but it wouldn't address the actual threat. He could wait for 5th Fleet authorization. That was the safe choice, the career-preserving choice, the choice that kept decision-making authority where the chain of command placed it, with admirals and policymakers who understood the full strategic picture. Captain Chen had, by his own later account, approximately 90 seconds of genuine deliberation. Then he decided. At 3:20, Captain Chen ordered weapons release against the confirmed launch site. 4 Tomahawk cruise missiles with coordinates derived from backwards extrapolation of the incoming missile trajectories. He then picked up the radio to 5th Fleet and reported in. Stout engaged by Iranian anti-ship missiles. 1 sailor wounded, minor hull damage, have initiated counter-battery fire. 4 Tomahawks inbound to launch site. Request additional strike authorization for expanded target set. The report reached Vice Admiral Santos at 3:23. She had two options: countermand Chen's strike, possible, but only if she acted immediately since the missiles were already in flight, or expand it. The logic of expansion was straightforward. Chen's 4 Tomahawks would destroy the battery that had fired. They would do nothing about the batteries that hadn't fired yet, and those batteries would still be operational tomorrow. Santos authorized expansion at 3:26. The cruiser USS Vicksburg, operating 60 nautical miles south, began launching at 3:31. 8 missiles, 2 per target. The destroyer USS Mitcher, 45 miles to the west, added 4 more. Her captain had been monitoring the engagement in real time and had already pre-positioned his weapons systems for rapid response without being told to. Total strike package: 16 Tomahawk cruise missiles, 4 separate Iranian military installations, 16 missiles traveling subsonic across the Gulf toward targets that, 29 minutes earlier, had not been on any active strike list. The first Tomahawk struck at 3:44. The NOR battery that had attacked the Stout was positioned on a rocky outcropping overlooking the Gulf. 2 launcher vehicles, 1 radar unit, 1 command vehicle, approximately 20 personnel. The Tomahawk approached from the northwest, flying a circuitous route designed to defeat Iranian early warning radars. It descended to terminal attack altitude 3 meters from impact. The first missile struck the command vehicle. 4 operators were killed instantly. The battery's ability to coordinate fire was eliminated. The second arrived 11 seconds later and struck the radar unit. The battery was now blind and leaderless. The third and fourth missiles destroyed the launcher vehicles. Secondary explosions from the propellant confirmed the kills. The battery that had attacked the USS Stout ceased to exist at 3:45. The secondary strikes were more complicated. The first secondary target was a suspected NOR battery 12 kilometers east of the confirmed site. Satellite imagery had shown launcher-shaped objects under camouflage netting. 2 Tomahawks struck the position. Post-strike analysis later confirmed it was a decoy. Wooden mock-ups constructed specifically to attract American missiles and intelligence attention. The Iranians were learning from every previous engagement. They had gotten better. The second secondary target was a coastal radar installation that provided early warning and targeting data for multiple missile batteries in the region. Not a launcher, but a critical node. 2 Tomahawks struck it. Both found legitimate equipment. The installation was destroyed. An estimated 8 personnel were killed. The third target was the most difficult decision. In the entire strike package, intelligence had identified a warehouse complex 400 meters from a civilian neighborhood, assessed to contain missile components, guidance systems, and stored propellant. Destroying it would meaningfully degrade Iran's ability to sustain long-range coastal attacks. But 400 meters from a residential area meant risk that no precision guidance system could eliminate entirely. The strike authorization came with a timing restriction. At 3:48 local time, most residents would be asleep. Foot traffic would be minimal. The risk, while not zero, was reduced to the threshold the authorization deemed acceptable. At 3:48:23, 2 Tomahawks struck the warehouse. Primary explosions remained contained within the structure. Subsequent fire investigation confirmed chemical propellant combustion consistent with missile materials. No confirmed civilian casualties. Iranian state media reported otherwise, but independent satellite analysis showed no structural damage to the adjacent residential area. The final 2 missiles from the Mitcher struck at 3:51. Their target, a mobile battery observed relocating 6 hours earlier. Coordinates were derived from predictive analysis. Where would the battery move based on known Iranian operating doctrine? The modeling was wrong. Both missiles struck empty terrain. The battery had moved somewhere the analysts hadn't anticipated. This is the reality of military operations, even with satellites and artificial intelligence and the most sophisticated targeting infrastructure in history. The fog of war does not dissolve. It adapts. Not every target is where you calculate it will be. Not every strike succeeds. At 3:52, the strike was complete. 29 minutes from the first missile impact on the Stout to the last Tomahawk hitting its target. Results: 1 confirmed missile battery destroyed, 1 coastal radar installation destroyed, 1 logistics facility destroyed, 1 decoy position destroyed, 1 empty field. Cratered. Iran lost an estimated 30 to 40 personnel, 1 operational missile system, and a critical radar node in its coastal defense network. The cost to the United States: 1 wounded sailor, minor hull damage on 1 destroyer, and 16 Tomahawk cruise missiles at approximately $1.5 million each. Petty Officer Morrison was evacuated to Bahrain by helicopter the following morning. The fragment had missed his femoral artery by 2 centimeters. 2 centimeters in the other direction, and he bleeds out on the weather deck before anyone reaches him. He would walk again after 6 months of rehabilitation. He would never return to sea duty. The Stout completed her patrol and returned to Bahrain for repairs. The hull penetration required 2 weeks in dry dock. The psychological adjustment required by her crew took considerably longer to assess. Captain Chen received a letter of commendation from the Chief of Naval Operations. His decision to initiate counter-battery fire without waiting for authorization from higher command was formally deemed tactically sound and strategically appropriate. The letter didn't say what everyone involved already understood, that he had also been fortunate. His missiles hit legitimate military targets. No civilians died in the streets. The escalation did not spiral into something larger. The margins held. This time. The diplomatic aftermath followed patterns that had become almost procedural by this point in the conflict. Iran condemned the strikes as unprovoked acts of aggression against sovereign territory. They released footage of what they characterized as destroyed civilian infrastructure. Footage that independent analysts subsequently determined was filmed at a separate location unrelated to the strikes. The United States defended the response as proportional self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter and displayed satellite imagery, radar tracks, and physical missile fragments recovered from the Stout's deck at a Pentagon briefing. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session. Russia and China blocked any resolution condemning either party. The session produced no outcome. Oil prices rose 8% before stabilizing over the following week. Insurance premiums for Gulf shipping increased again. Tanker operators quietly began routing some traffic through alternative lanes. And in the Persian Gulf, the deterrence calculation adjusted once more. The 29-minute timeline demonstrated something that had previously been doctrine but was now confirmed fact. American commanders in the Gulf did not need Washington's permission to fight back. The authority had been delegated to the theater level. The weapons were ready. The doctrine was unambiguous. Attack an American warship and the response would be kinetic, proportional, and fast. Not fast enough to prevent the initial attack. No defensive system is perfect against a well-planned strike. But fast enough to ensure the attacker paid a significant price within the same hour. Whether that speed would deter the next attack was genuinely unknowable. The Iranians might conclude that the exchange rate was acceptable, that 1 battery and 1 radar installation was a price worth paying for demonstrating the capability to hit an American destroyer in the Gulf. They might conclude that better tactics, more missiles, better decoys, improved timing, could achieve results that justified the cost. They might calculate that escalation itself served their broader strategic interests in ways that individual engagements couldn't capture. What was certain, this night had added another data point to an ongoing experiment that neither side had formally chosen to run, but both sides were now running in real time. Ships hit, missiles launched, targets struck, casualties sustained, diplomatic processes initiated and stalled, prices adjusted, insurance recalculated, and somewhere along the Iranian coast, surviving missile crews relocated their equipment, studied what had failed, and began preparing for the next opportunity. The pattern was accelerating. Each engagement taught both sides something operational. Each response raised the stakes incrementally. Each escalation narrowed the distance between a limited naval confrontation and something that had no limit at all. 29 minutes from attack to response, 2 centimeters from a severed artery, 340 meters from catastrophe. Modern warfare lives entirely inside margins like these. It always has. The technology changes. The weapons get faster and more precise. The decision cycles compress until human beings are making irreversible choices in seconds. But the margins, the distance between an incident and a disaster, between a controlled response and an uncontrolled war, those margins are always smaller than they appear from the outside. On February 10, 2026, the margins held. The question worth sitting with isn't whether American retaliation was fast or effective or legally sound. It was all of those things. The question is what happens the night the margins don't hold? What happens when the second missile lands 40 meters closer, or the fragment finds the femoral artery, or a captain's Tomahawk strikes something that turns a tactical response into a strategic crisis? The Persian Gulf in 2026 was a system under pressure. Every engagement was a test of how much pressure it could absorb before the structure changed. On this particular night, the answer was enough. For now.